Hello, fellow listeners, and welcome back to the Zarlequan podcast. Before we dive into today's topic, I want to emphasize that I'm here to share insights and knowledge. I am not an expert in the traditional sense. The information I provide is the result of personal research and exploration, and it's important for you to approach it with a critical and curious mindset. In a world overflowing with information, it's easy to get caught up in the words of others and take them as gospel. However, I strongly encourage each of you to engage in your own research, to question and to seek a well-rounded understanding of any topic. This podcast serves as a starting point, a catalyst for deeper inquiry. But your journey of discovery should extend beyond these episodes. We're all unique individuals with our own perspectives, experiences, and needs. What resonates with one person might not resonate with another. It's a beautiful thing when diverse viewpoints come together to create a richer tapestry of understanding. So, as you absorb the insights shared on this podcast or anywhere else, remember that critical thinking is your ally. Take the time to cross-reference information from multiple sources, consider various viewpoints, and don't hesitate to challenge assumptions. In a world where information is at our fingertips, it's our responsibility to be discerning consumers. The pursuit of knowledge is an ongoing journey, and by taking ownership of your learning, you empower yourself to make informed decisions and form your own conclusions. Thank you for being part of this extraordinary journey on the Zarlequan podcast. As we move forward, I invite you to embrace your role as a seeker of truth, curious mind, and a thoughtful investigator. Let's continue to learn, grow, and expand our horizons together. I'm your host, Brittani Starr, and I'm thrilled to have you join us on this literary journey. This week, we're diving deep into the realm of emotions and communication. We explored the power of understanding and healing anger. Drawing inspiration from an enlightening conversation I had with a special guest, my own dad. Together, we unravel the threads of healthy communication and emotional growth, offering insights that can transform the way we navigate relationships and inner landscapes. But that's not all. The Zarlequan podcast is also your gateway to discovering remarkable authors and their works. If you're passionate about indie literature, you're in for a treat. We'll introduce you to voices that deserve to be heard, stories that tug at your heartstrings, and perspectives that expand your horizons. So whether you're an avid reader, a fellow writer, or simply someone seeking inspiration, join us at Zarlequan.com to connect, engage, and celebrate the beauty of words. If you're ready to explore the magic of storytelling and support the voices of the literary world, this podcast is your invitation to a vibrant community of thought-provoking discussions and captivating narratives. Thank you for being part of the Zarlequan podcast family. Let's embark on this week's adventure together. Today, what I want to talk about with you is, so one of my biggest stories is growing up, you never yelled at us. I actually never had someone yell at me until I was 16 in a play with Rusty, remember? And I was supposed to be the abused daughter who was used to being yelled at, and as soon as he yelled at me, I ran off stage and was like scared. Yeah, exactly. Why are you doing this? What's happening? He's like, no, you're supposed to not be scared and stand here. I don't know what to do with that. So that was my first experience being yelled at by a man. And now that I'm older, I experience all these other men like that have no control apparently, or I don't know. I'm like, from my perspective, I'm like, I don't know. I grew up with no one yelling at me, so I don't know why you people would raise your voice. Like, what's wrong with you? Yeah. And so I discovered that that's not just a normal thing that everybody just knows not to yell. So what is it about you that you discovered that wasn't an effective way of communication? And like, what things do you do to not allow yourself to yell? Or how do you have that much control?
Well, I think it mostly has to do with what's been effective in terms of working or trying to communicate whatever message I have at that moment. And, I've had people say, hey, you're yelling, when in fact I'm not. If you had a decibel meter, you'd say, no, it's not louder. But it's a matter of using words in effective ways and using effective words to drive home a message. Because if you say, if you just kind of let loose and start screaming, what happens to the other person, I mean, it just either, as you said, runs off, or they throw up defenses. They're no longer hearing you. You know, you're not delivering any message other than you're upset. But in terms of what made me upset, what I thought was unfair, what I thought, you know, whatever, there's no conversation happening. They just see that I'm having an emotional problem.
Right.
Because their defenses are up, they're not hearing anything I've got to say. So I guess the first answer is that it's just largely ineffective. It doesn't do what it is I want to do. If I feel like I've been treated unfairly, I want to have a conversation about that. I want to explain, here's why I think that was unfair, and here's what I think maybe we could do to do it better from my perspective.
Right.
But in terms of, you know, being in the moment and getting mad, well, yeah, of course I do. Watch me drive sometime. But I think that if it's in a situation where I'm actually dealing, I mean, I can say mean things to the other cars, with everybody in the game knows they're not going to hear it.
Right.
But if I'm like that same person, if we're like talking, I'm probably not going to scream. It's largely ineffective. And I guess it came from my raising to a large extent. You know, that there just wasn't a lot of yelling going on in my household as I was raised. It just wasn't done. I don't know if that was a function of being a Southern family. It just wasn't how we communicated. I mean, we certainly had aggression. I mean, I can recall being 10 years old and being mad at my 18-year-old sister and you know, threatening her with a hacksaw. So there was aggression present, but even with the hacksaw, we didn't yell. But why do you have a hacksaw? Well, because I thought perhaps I'd injure you because you've annoyed me. You know?
At least you can talk reasonably with the hacksaw.
Yeah. So I have this hacksaw, and I feel like I can put some slashes on your legs to get your attention so that we can have a better conversation.
Well, I don't recall any of my aunts having leg slashes, so it must have worked out in conversation.
Yeah, we were able to work that out.
That's good. That's good.
Yeah.
I hear so many stories about siblings. I remember some funny ones myself. But so your family, oh yeah, I don't remember grandma or grandpa ever raising their voice, but you know, by that time I'm like, oh, it's just because they're so old, they don't have the energy.
No, it just didn't happen. I mean, it was, you know, way different time. You know, it's a function of me being so old, so it was a way different time. So, like, he would, like, disappear for days, and it was just like, oh, he's on a toot, was the saying. And it just meant he was going to go get drunk and stay gone 2 or 3 days, and his substance abuse was interesting because he would just do that, then he's good for another, 6 months.
Oh, wow.
So, it wasn't constant. And by the time he retired, he'd go hang out in the old man bars.
Yeah.
But he never got, like, out of control drunk. You know, just, okay, I've had my beers and talked to the other old men. We're good.
That's awesome. Interesting. It sounds like people used to just kind of work things out as they went instead of...
Yeah, I mean, if you, like, ran that forward and a dude took off and disappeared for 3 days at a time, and it was covered in bars, there'd probably be a lot of things happen because of that. I don't know. So I don't know, but yeah, that was how that worked. And like I said, if you ask me today, was my father an alcoholic? I don't think so. Just every 6 months or so, he wanted to go and do that, which okay.
Blow off some steam. I mean, as long as she was okay with it.
Yeah, I mean, she was like, yeah. She was kind of like, yeah, it's cool for him to be gone for a few days. Yeah, that works.
I was going to say, Grandma was always fine with, yeah, I'll take over. That's fine. You can go and do whatever you're going to do. Yeah. Did you ever have a problem with anger and then get a hold of it? Or... I've had a lot of men tell me that anger is natural to men. That's it's innate to them, and so they just don't. They've never been taught how to deal with their emotions, and so that's why they're just all over the place and have no control.
I mean, I suppose maybe that's true. I mean, I don't know if there's good science to say that there's a gender difference in anger. I don't know, but
I was wondering about that. I was like, well, women feel anger too. I'm like, I don't.
It's just a human condition.
Yeah.
I mean, like I said, I certainly feel lots of anger, but I don't recall, to your question, I don't recall like ever being in a situation where I was like, I'm like, okay, I will employ the following techniques, because certainly, as I said, watch me drive, I'll get anger. So have it, but I think there was the only thing I could say is perhaps driven by, again, some really early programming and kind of the Southern home, right? The Southern genteel attitudes, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
And again, I don't expect this to work in the world we live in now, but at that time, there was a lot of rules about how you dealt with a lady. There was a lot of thought about that, and it was very different than what you did with a male, right?
Okay.
You would never dream of being aggressive with a lady. That's out of the question. And part of that aggression includes yelling, includes gesticulating, certainly includes physical violence. It just, that from early on, it just inculcated in. It's like, no, you don't do that. They are, again, very, very dated mentality, but I think there might be some germ of good to be taken from it.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's like, okay, they're to be protected, provided for, and all these kinds of things. Never are they to be the recipient of aggression. In fact, if there is aggression, your job is to step in front and take it, right? You're the shield, the guard, which, again, we're in a different world now. That came from a very different world.
Right.
At that point. But certainly that level of inculcated, a very deep level of that thinking, that was a very important issue. No, it's a very different thing. If it's another dude and you just want to fire on them, great. And if you wind up in the hospital, okay, you gotta come in. But you would never think of it. No, that's unthinkable. So pretty deep. And for us, I guess on the good side of the Southern home, it was also racism was not tolerated in any way, shape, or form. There was words you did not say in our home. You would pay a price for saying those words. So while it had that Southern lilt to it in terms of being genteel, it did not have that answering racism that was pretty unfortunately present in a lot of that. So.
I was going to say, that's how you taught us. We weren't, there were certain words that just were not allowed growing up, and we just didn't think in terms of race. Right.
So, at whatever levels, that continued. But those would be the things that would drive, most certainly would say, yeah, you don't. I would not, to this day, I would not consider yelling and being aggressive at a woman. That would not cross my mind.
Well, you experienced, though, I mean, you wouldn't cross your mind, but there have been other guys, like there's, the stories of in the 50s or 70s of men being abusive to their wives. I know you used to counsel people. Yeah. Have you ever counseled someone that you had to help through something like that?
I have, and honestly, it's quite difficult for me because they come from a very, very different standpoint. Because there's the ones I've dealt with have been really, really kind of based on a victim sort of mentality. These things happen to me, and therefore I can't tolerate it when this woman in my life gives me stress.
Oh.
So I've been victimized. I've had it rough, and I'm not going to put up with it anymore. Here I go. That's kind of what I observe. But you're absolutely right. Coming through, 50s, 60s, 70s, there were men who routinely beat their wife and routinely got away with it, right? I mean, the cops come, hey, why don't you stop that? Be better next time,
Right.
So certainly none of that was good. So I'm not holding that the raising that I got was common, because I don't think it was.
Right.
Again, it was Southern, but it was that genteel Southern. Kind of not Dukes of Hazzard, maybe?
Well, what advice do you have to men that are in that position, that for various reasons they think it's okay to be aggressive or physically violent with?
I mean, that's hard, because you have somebody who's, that's how they function. That's how they communicate. What I usually find often, somebody who does it, I find they don't have any other tools, right?
Right.
They're not able to say, here's how I feel. Here's what I think made me feel that way. And, they're not able to dissect it in that way. And I suppose it's really a question of how willing they are to get to that place, because it's just way too easy to blast out, right?
Yeah, that's the primitive approach. And I also wanted to make clear that we have also seen women that beat their husbands as well. I don't think it's a gendered thing.
I mean, violence is violence, right?
This is, I would say it's a person that needs to do some inner work.
Yeah. And my guess is, I think that, this is from an old person talking, of course, but I mean, it seems to me that we value a deeper level communications less, right? We look for quicker answers, and a quick answer is yell. And that there is some commitment to doing the work if you're going to say, okay, look, here's how I feel, here's why I feel like that. As most people feel, if they get in that conversation, they're going to be at a disadvantage if the other person is more verbose, right?
Right.
So, that's a tough one to unravel. I mean, somebody who's like just kind of their life path has to act that way. Honestly, I don't know that I've ever seen it change in a real way.
Even if they're aware of it and they want to.
Well, yeah. I mean, it's got to start there.
Okay.
And I'm sure there's some really good, like, just anger management techniques and, things that smart people would teach. I don't know.
I wonder if they're... So they can use techniques, but is it always bubbling under because they haven't learned how to process?
Well, I think that's probably hitting the nail on the head there. Yeah, the techniques could maybe work as a patch or a pathway, but if you don't fix that underlying unwillingness or inability to communicate, I don't see it there being a long-term fix, right?
Right, because if you're tired or you're in pain or, you're not at top notch, then you'll usually just go to your default reaction. Right.
So, yeah, I think that, and I honestly don't know how you teach a person to be willing to have conversations about how they feel. Because it's a fairly exposed position to be in.
Right, it's vulnerable, and that's scary.
As soon as you do that, the other person could say, that's nonsense, I don't care, you're silly, you're stupid. And then now you're saying deep parts of me are stupid. So it's become way worse.
Yeah. So you don't know that people could fully heal from that or move on from that place?
Oh, I'm sure they can. I should correct that. I mean, at the very least, they can figure out ways to become way more functional without using that violence. And by violence, I think that the screaming and all that all is part of violence in my world, as far as I'm concerned. Once you've gotten to a point where you're unleashing anger, even if it doesn't reach a physical level, it's still violent. It fills the room. It fills everything. So So I think, yes, I think absolutely people can learn and change, and certainly with some professional help, and learn that. And really, all that's trying to get at the notion of being able and willing to talk about how you feel. That's really, to me, that's the base of all of it.
So the base of it is that this person is not learned to maybe identify their emotions and then be able to speak about it. So we have to start there. That's what I like to teach my kids, that, like, okay, what are we feeling right now? Sometimes have a little graph, like, where are we on this graph? Where do we feel? Because I find that as an adult, I've discovered a lot of people have no idea what they're feeling, and they just default everything to anger.
Exactly. So, I mean, I think that, developing that ability and willingness to take the risk and say, okay, here's what I feel. And, you have to kind of create ground rules. And there has to be an atmosphere that says, okay, you get to say that. It's like, okay, even I may not agree with it, or I might not think it's valid, but you get to say it. So I think there's a lot of pieces involved in that, but can a person do it? Of course they can. Yeah.
Right. So what do you do with anger because you have been married for a long time, longer than I've been alive. So it's been a minute, and you guys have, still like each other and whatnot. And so how do you deal with anger inside your relationship after being married for an extended period of time?
Well, imperfectly. That's a perfect answer. Those things we talked about get applied, right? Mm-hmm. We may have something where we like kind of both raise up and go, oh, we don't like this. And usually the first thing that happens is one or the other separates, goes a different direction, in the house or whatever, Mm-hmm. And then usually what happens is one or the other kind of says, okay, so here's what I was feeling, here's what was going on, so that's why I did that. I'm like, oh, okay, so here's what I'm thinking, and it usually fixes it.
Okay.
Or something like, maybe if other people are around and one does something or doesn't do something, later on, usually there'll be a conversation like, wow, when we were there and you were talking to that person, that really made me feel bad because, I looked bad in that conversation, whatever it is, Mm-hmm. So I think, and we just kind of generically do that. So, yeah.
You just made that part of your relationship now, that you just openly talk about how you feel with each other.
Yeah, I mean, it may not happen at that moment, at the flash, right? It's like, I've been insulted. My honor has been degraded.
So what do you do right then? Like, you feel your honor has been degraded. You're upset. How dare this person that I love, that's supposed to love me, treat me this way? You're in that moment. Say you're out in public or you're with other people. How do you react?
Distance. I mean, if at all possible, remove yourself. Go. You're in no position to have a rational conversation, and it's going to turn bad if you do. Right. So, yeah, I mean, if it, maybe there's public things where you can't or whatever, but if it's at all possible, go have distance.
What do you think the distance does?
I think it gives you time to become more rational, because, you're at a flashpoint and it's like, I shall now defend my honor. Well, you got to get away from that. You got to get the temp down a little bit. And it, I find that it goes pretty quickly. Like, for me, if I'd been that, if I've, walked away or whatever, I'm going to start trying to refine it and say, okay, what is it that made me upset? What actually made me mad? Because then I can have the conversation about it once I've kind of identified it. I that was unfair, or, whatever. Right.
Just whatever that feeling was, but as soon as you feel that heightened emotion is when you say, that's when you leave. That's when you go get space.
And when I say get space, I don't mean like days. You don't go off like my dad and have a toot. But yeah, I mean, just, another room in the house or in the yard or whatever.
Go for a swim, go for a walk, like,
Sure.
yeah, whatever the case may be. I think that's a wise decision. What about, I've heard in the past there used to be a thing where don't let the sun go down on your anger. So you always fix everything before you go to sleep. What do you think about that?
I think that's a fabulous thing. I can't say I've always practiced it. I might have gone to bed a few times going, I think it's a great idea. I do. That's not I think that's a great standard, but I wouldn't beat myself up if I didn't hold it every single time.
I would say there. So mom, I think she instilled in us to always wear clean underwear when we left the house and take our license in case we died, so that they knew who we were. And but it was always before you left, always, make sure that we're all good. Say I love you, give hug, no matter if you're mad, because you wouldn't want things to be left that way if there was a disaster of some sort.
Yeah, I think that's fabulous. I mean, that's some actual true functional wisdom there.
Right. I hold that with my kids to this day. Before they leave, I don't care what's been going on. If I never see you again, no matter if you're just going to the store, it doesn't matter. Things happen in a split second. I know so many times with the kids growing up, everything's fine. I turn around and disaster. It's that fast, and you never know when it is. So I'm like, nope, we don't have time for this being mad stuff.
That's a great thing.
So what advice do you have to someone that may be struggling with aggression, whether it's yelling or complete physical violence?
I think that you have to understand you're not going to face it yourself. You lack the resources. You do not have it within you, unless you're a tiny, tiny minority. I don't know, maybe you sit on the floor and levitate, but if you're not that person, if you're not floating through the air in the lotus position, then probably you're going to have somebody else involved, because we have too many built-in pathways where we create realities for ourselves. And the realities we create really aren't the same one that everyone else is living. Very seldom are.
Right.
So you've got to have another voice. It can't be the person. It can't be your opponent. It has to be an outside voice. Maybe it's a friend, maybe it's a counselor, whatever it is, but it's somebody who you've given access to speak to your life. Because I don't see how anyone can make it past that without that part.
Okay. So at least
when someone says, no, I will not speak to a counselor or not, to me, I'm like, okay, well, you pretty much closed the door of having any hope of improving things. I don't know what else to tell you.
So sometimes it can take a while, though, to find a counselor that you jive with, or you're in alignment with, that you guys are on the same page. I hear a lot of people talking to me, telling me how they're like, okay, I get that I need a counselor, but the one that I'm seeing, I feel like I'm more knowledgeable than them. I've had numerous people telling me this. They're just not, they're like, I don't know what I'm getting out of it.
I think what you need to look for, and yes, that's very true. And that's why, I'm not saying it has to be a licensed kind of person. I mean, I think that's great, but it can be a trusted friend. It can be, can be anybody that you give the access to speak to your life. In terms of, their qualifications or their IQ or anything else, I think that's way less important than their capacity for empathy.
Okay.
If I'm having someone speak to my life, I want to be sure that they're empathetic. I want them to have some sense of, that's pretty tough, rather than just here's rule number 2 through 7, and skip that and do 9 and 11 too.
Right.
I don't. No, I want somebody who's going to have an empathetic approach to it.
I actually saw, I don't know where I was watching something, and there was it was like a therapist talking about recreating your neural pathways. Maybe she was a doctor, but that's the only way to stop yourself from doing something negative is you have to retrain your neural pathways. Like she had someone come to her that was having anxiety and was being overwhelmed by it, and it took months, but it's a process of slowly retraining yourself in a different direction for positivity rather than the anxiety. And I think you were kind of talking about that, like you have to redirect the neural pathways. And
yeah, I mean that sounds extremely helpful. I like it. Because it's the same thing that we'd call retraining yourself or whatever else. I mean, that's just a more, I think, a scientific term that's going to say, okay, my brain used to work this way, now it works this way.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's great. I think that's a very hopeful message. I like it a lot.
Yeah, I like the message of hope. That works for me. Because it's becoming a widespread problem. I noticed a lot of anger all over the place, and nobody knowing how to deal with their emotions as much anymore.
Yeah, I agree. I think that on the whole, as a culture, we're pretty pissed off.
Yeah. With some validity.
Yeah, we're really agitated. Politics, we're in silos all over the place. So, yeah, I agree with that. I'm not quick to say that, social media made that happen or technology made that happen because, they were humans using social media and we're humans using technology. So,
right.
Clearly we don't value the notion of gentility like we once did,
Mm-hmm.
That old kind of genteel approach. I don't think we value that much. We value winning. We value financial success, whatever. We like the notion of a competitive win as opposed to having a social standard that makes things more comfortable for everybody.
I think that's true. I don't think that's how you raised us. I think we were more told to be good people. Well, I'm not good people, but be mindful. No kind of racism was allowed. We don't look at people based on their class. It's, everybody's a respectable human until they prove otherwise.
Yeah.
And that creativity was highly valued in our family. Like, I remember growing up, we used to put on concerts. Remember Striper concerts? You guys cut us out with plywood, the shape of the Striper guitars, and we painted them, and we would put on whole shows and writing poetry, music. You were always in bands.
Yeah, that's that was certainly from my mother because she was all about creativity, music, and the arts, and she fully supported all that.
Yeah, you're still in plays and whatnot to this day.
Yep.
And still doing bands. So, I mean, creativity, was very, and, again, everybody across the board is a respected human until they prove otherwise. Class, race, none of that matters. Those were hardcore.
Those are the standards we want to reach. Don't make it all the time, but yeah.
We also were pretty open in discussing things. Like we had a ritual of, sitting down at dinner or even all hanging out together at the end of the day and talking about our day.
Yeah, I think so. Probably at that time that was fairly common, I think.
I went to other people's houses. I'm not sure how common that was.
Oh,
I visited other people. We lived in the South too, so that there was more of that than there was in California.
Probably some kind of localized area kind of social settings. I think there's expectations of it. Geographically, there certainly was some difference around the country, no doubt.
Yeah. So, did you ever have to teach, because I have two brothers, did you ever have to teach them about anger?
I don't recall actively doing that. You know, I don't think that was. Yeah, I don't think that was any kind of special subject.
So did like, because there's, three of us, did we ever act out in anger that you had to, like, that's unacceptable?
Well, sure. I mean, every kid does, right? I mean, so I don't have any specific events in mind. I'm sure, yeah, people got mad. Anytime you put people together, someone's getting mad about something. But yeah, I'm sure there was. I mean, hopefully it was corrected in a good way. I don't know.
I'm like, I can't, nothing sticks out, like, I can remember. I remember funny things, like, when we used to play football, you guys weren't allowed to tackle me. I would get picked up and spun around and set gently on the ground. And
yeah. See, therein is the part of that southern genteel thinking coming through there.
That was pretty funny. Yeah, I can't think of any. What other things have I not covered on anger? I'm trying to. Do you have any advice for anyone that is not knowing what to do? They're feeling like constantly triggered and constantly in a heightened state, like ready to, defend themselves, but nobody else around them is thinking that they're, doing anything that needs defense. That they need.
I think you have to take it in, like, kind of stages. Like, if you have this, like, you're in that first stage, you're in no place to try to think about how you talk about your feelings because you're so far from even being in a place for that function to work. So, I mean, you're going to start with, number one, of course, I mean, I'm going to say that you're going to have someone else that you can speak to. Somebody else has to be able to speak to your life from the outside of it. Mm-hmm. That's certainly essential. But I think there's also just some really, 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 really basic things to start with. It's like, even dietary, like, okay, are you, like, cranking down coffee all day long? Are you drinking, what were those Cokes they used to have that had, like, 10,000 things of caffeine, Wahoos or Woo, whatever it was.
Was it their Jolt Cola?
Jolt. Yeah,
I think they took it away. They made it, yeah.
But I mean, is your diet such that you're sending yourself into a heightened state constantly? Tons of sugar, tons of caffeine, and just all kinds of stuff that sends you. All of that messes with your physiology and it winds up messing with your emotions. So, I think you can start with some easy things. Start trying to get your body to where it's not fighting against being reasonable.
That makes sense. Take out the roadblocks. That makes sense.
But I think that it's important that there's someone saying, okay, that state that you're in is not tenable. That you can't stay there. I get that you're there, and I get that you can't throw a switch and make it go away. But we have to start this journey to make that go away. Because it's not tenable. You can't stay like that.
That's a good point. What is a reasonable amount of time to give someone that is in that state to make improvement? And what does improvement look like?
Well, I mean, that's a totally case-by-case situation. It's hard to make anything hard and fast there. But, I mean, obviously it has to move towards getting that person who can speak to the life, right? I mean, that's obvious, huge, markable improvement, right? That's a really hard one for a lot of people to get past. They've never even considered that as a possibility. So getting to that place, that's pretty huge.
Okay. Are there, like, can you give, like, 3 actionable small steps that they could do, like, today?
Well, I would say, number one, again, repeating, but take a look at what you're ingesting. I mean, really, I'm by no means no diet king here, but take a look at the things that you're eating and learn how that can affect how you feel. and how your emotions are working and how agitated you get. So start there. Second, learn to walk away. There's a simple one. Just get that one. Identify the feeling. Learn how to identify the feeling and remove yourself. You don't need to stand your ground. Please don't stand your ground. Please give away ground.
Throw your ground away.
Yeah, please give your ground away. I mean, so there's you can do that right away, right? That's before you figure anything out. Maybe you don't have the capacity when you go away to start saying, okay, what's really made me mad? That would be the next step, right?
Right.
When you go away, start asking yourself, what really made me mad? Not that the other person wore a red shirt today and you hate red. That probably wasn't it. Yeah. It's probably that she said you're a dummy for not having a red shirt. I mean, I don't know.
But you don't even like red.
Yeah.
Okay. So for people that are struggling with this right now, there is hope for them and their families.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, some choices have to get made, but, you know, I think they'd find themselves with a better life afterwards, because ultimately all that aggression and anger, what do you want to do? You want to gain control. Why do you want control? Honestly, because you're afraid, right? The fearful person is the one who wants control, and they want to control the environment around them because the environment frightens them. So if you think about it, if you look at it, you say, well, I've been, really angry and really aggressive, but it hasn't really gotten me any of the control I wanted. I'm still afraid of all this stuff. So I think you could begin to look at the notion of how futile that whole approach has been.
So how do you get a hold of that? Because I think that is a human condition of people want to be in control, and if I have control, then I'm safe. So how do you get past...
But I think you have to I think you have to really be able to start dissecting that and say, why do I need control? And honestly, huge percent of the time, I'm actually kind of frightened if I don't have control. It makes me so frightened. That thing might fall over there, and this could happen here. I need to control the stuff around me and make it safe. And that, and then what happens is you kind of exerting these controls, and the people who fall under that control resent that. So I don't want to be controlled. No, thank you. And so then they fire back, you fire back, and off you go.
Right. So learning about control is a helpful...
Well, learning, for the most part, you find what that fear is, find what it is you're afraid of.
Well, it could be many fears, though, couldn't it?
Sure. And it usually is like this big old ball of all kinds of things that they're afraid of, going back through their whole life. And, and that takes a long time to kind of get that all untangled, but just starting with the notion of, okay, I'm controlling because I'm afraid. And then you want to start trying to put the words I'm afraid of. And that none of this happens fast.
Mm-hmm. And so just so everyone knows that this could be any age, too. You can be in your 60s still figuring this out, or you can be in your 20s and have a good grasp on it.
I think so. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I don't think that's... Certainly, I see plenty of old people like me who are just crazy as all get out.
Just crazy as all get out. So there are people that never heal and never move on from that because they just don't take the time to look at their feelings, really.
No, I mean, it's just I'm a victim. This one did me in, then I turn around, this one did me in. I mean, you hear it when people come together, when they start communicating, they storytell, right? We tell our stories. We all have our set of stories we tell, and if you listen to those stories, if all of those end with the person being victimized, I was victimized here, and then I had this thing going on, but I was victimized here, I was victimized here. Okay, that's going to give, that should be some red flags.
Okay. I would also say that there's also different stages in your life, that it's okay to go through that and feel it, but to also let it go.
Yeah, well, certainly, if you're in a process of, like, discovery, if you will, trying to go through and say, okay, here's these things, then absolutely, yeah. But the goal there is, as you said, that is to look at it, dissect it, take it apart, see how it colors you now, and then, yeah, get past it.
Right. That's the entire point. So what we're talking about is when people get stuck at different stages, how do we move through those stages?
Yeah, I mean, the worst case is someone's just like, okay, I've been victimized, now I'm going to go create victims, and I'm getting my revenge on the world, and no one's getting up on me. That's pretty tough to get past that one.
Yes, and I would say that most of that is subconscious. I don't think people are like, most of the time. I've seen it, but a lot of the time, a lot of the people that are doing the most aggression aren't even aware of what state they're in, and they're like, this is totally valid. I feel, really angry, so I am allowed to express that.
Yeah, of course. Of course. I mean, the question you want to have is, does it always stay that way, or do they have moments? You'd like to hope there's like moments of, wow, okay, that was kind of over the top.
Yeah, so they can see like, oh, well, that usually comes from other people reflecting back to you. Like, you see their response, and hopefully you have some kind of empathy that you can go, oh, that was too much. Hopefully the people you love that's how you figure out, like, oh, I need to change something.
True.
Yeah. So what would you leave everyone with?
Let's see. Be nice and send money to me. That's great.
There's not a button for that.
Yeah, okay.
But be nice to everybody.
Yeah.
So one of my...
That sounds ridiculous when you think about it. Actually, it kind of is a succinct way of saying how you want to go forward.
Well, funny enough, I've been looking into, I like doing research and see what science says, and, all this kind of stuff. And it's about just even the words we speak to ourselves. That words are very powerful, and how you speak to yourself can change your behavior. It changes your attitude about things and the way you perceive things. So if you're using negativity and you're surrounding yourself with it, you're going to have a more negative attitude. You're going to feel more down. But if you're using happier language, your wording, and the way you write your prose and whatnot, it's all about how you're taking on what's happening, because 5 different people can be there for the same exact experience, and they all took it on in a different way.
Yeah, true. Yeah.
So you can change the way you're perceiving things by using, putting yourself in a more positive place.
I totally agree with that.
Rewiring your mind for calmer responses, navigating anger with neural pathways. We're delving into the fascinating world of neuroplasticity and how it can help us transform our reactions to powerful emotions, particularly anger. Anger, a natural and universal emotion, can sometimes lead us down a path of impulsive reactions and negative outcomes. But what if we could change that? The human brain's incredible capacity for change, known as neuroplasticity, holds the key to reshaping our responses to triggers and fostering more mindful behavior. Neural pathways are like well-worn trails in the brain, formed by repeated thoughts and actions. When we find ourselves reacting to anger in ways that don't serve us, it's often due to these established pathways. The good news is that just as a trail can be redirected, so can our thought patterns. The first step in rewiring neural pathways is cultivating self-awareness. Recognizing the moments when anger begins to rise within you allows you to pause and observe your thoughts, feelings, and physical sensations. This conscious awareness is the seed from which change can grow. Number 2 is mindful interventions. Number 4, practicing empathy. Empathy is a powerful tool for changing neural pathways. Mindfulness practices such as meditation, deep breathing, or progressive muscle relaxation can interrupt the automatic response of anger. By engaging in these techniques, you're giving your brain a chance to forge new pathways, leading to more thoughtful reactions over time. Number 3, reframing thoughts. Negative thoughts often fuel anger. Begin to challenge these thoughts by reframing them in a more balanced and rational light. Instead of dwelling on what's making you angry, focus on solutions and alternatives and the bigger picture. When you make an effort to understand the perspectives and emotions of others, it can diffuse your own anger and encourage compassionate responses. Number 5, consistency and patience. Just as a new trail takes time to form, rewiring your brain's pathways requires patience and consistency. Be gentle with yourself. Each time you choose a calmer response, you're strengthening a new neural connection. Remember, dear listeners, that changing your neural pathways is an ongoing journey. By cultivating mindfulness, practicing empathy, and challenging automatic responses, you're crafting a more harmonious relationship with your emotions. As we continue to explore the beauty of emotional growth on the Zarlequan podcast, know that you have the power to nurture positive change within yourself. And there you have it, dear listeners. The conclusion of another captivating episode of the Zarlequan podcast. Thank you for joining me today as we explored the art of reshaping our responses to emotions and delve into the concept of rewiring neural pathways. Remember, personal growth is a continuous process, and the insights we've shared here are just the beginning. As you navigate your own emotional landscape and seek to foster healthier responses, I encourage you to apply the knowledge you've gained today. Before we part ways, a heartfelt reminder that your voice matters. Whether you're a passionate writer, an avid reader, and if you're an indie author with a unique voice, remember that your story deserves to be heard. Consider being a guest on our show and having your book featured. As we sign up today, let's carry the wisdom of today's episode with us. May our neural pathways lead us to responses that reflect our growth, empathy, and our commitment to more harmonious existence. Thank you for being part of the Zarlequan podcast family. Until next time, keep exploring, keep creating, and keep discovering the beauty within and around you. And there you have it, dear listeners. The conclusion of another captivating episode of the Zarlequan podcast. Thank you for joining me today as we explored the art of reshaping our responses to emotions and delve into the concept of rewiring neural pathways. Remember, personal growth is a continuous process, and the insights we've shared here are just the beginning. As you navigate your own emotional landscape and seek to foster healthier responses, I encourage you to apply the knowledge you've gained today. Before we part ways, a heartfelt reminder that your voice matters. Whether you're a passionate writer, an avid reader, or someone simply looking to connect, the Zarlequan podcast is here to support your journey. Reach out, engage, and let's continue to celebrate the magic of words and stories together. If you're ready to embark on this podcasting adventure, don't forget to visit Zarlequan.com. If you're ready to embark on this podcasting adventure with me, don't forget to visit Zarlequan.com and join our vibrant community. If you're an indie author with a unique voice, remember that your story deserves to be heard. Consider being a guest on our show and having your book featured. As we sign up today, let's carry the wisdom of today's episode with us. May our neural pathways lead us to responses that reflect our growth, empathy, and our commitment to more harmonious existence. Thank you for being part of the Zarlequan podcast family. Until next time, keep exploring, keep creating, and keep discovering the beauty within and around you.